Candice Savino is currently the CTO at Chicago startup Farmer's Fridge. At Farmer's Fridge, she leads the company's engineering, product design, IT, and data teams. Prior to Farmer's Fridge, Candice worked as the vice president of engineering at Trunk Club, leading the engineering and data teams. With more than 17 years of technology and leadership experience from companies including Groupon, WMS Gaming, Encyclopedia Britannica, and IBM, Candice brings a wealth of experience scaling consumer technology platform, building diverse technology teams, and leading innovation. Candice was named Crane's Tech 50 in 2017 and Crane's Notable Women in STEM in 2020 and worked as a mentor at 1871 Chicago Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. Candice graduated with a Bachelor of Science Computer Science from DePaul University. Welcome, Candice. Hey everybody, this is Marina Malagudi, your host at UNBOSSED. Today I have a very special guest who actually was gracious enough to come back to UNBOSSED because our first try at this interview was how we had a lot of technical difficulties. This is Candice Savino, CTO at Farmer's Fridge. Welcome, Candice, and thank you for
coming. Thank you so much for having me.
So Candice, we've had this conversation a little bit about this, but I loved having you last time, and some of the story you told me last time about you growing up as a woman in tech really struck with me. Who was Candice growing up as a girl, and did you think you were going to be CTO of a company one day?
Who was I? So I grew up on the far south side of Chicago, in Blue Island. I had a twin sister and a younger brother. My dad was a fireman for 35 years, and my mom was a hairdresser. She did hair out of the basement of our house. I was a very type A person. I was very interested in school. I guess you could have, I was definitely a bookworm. I remember flying through books very, very quickly. I was always doing a lot of homework. I played volleyball through grade school and half of high school.
Nice.
So yeah, I got interested in tech, or just really like computers and software at the time, because my father was constantly doing odd jobs around town, and he was very big on the bartering system. And so I think he replaced someone's air conditioner, and they gave him like an old makeshift desktop computer with like an old, Microsoft, on there, and OS on there. And I just started tinkering around, and that's back when like we were dealing with like dial-up modems and whatnot. And so I think that's like kind of when my interest started to peak. And then I was lucky enough to get enrolled in a programming class in my high school. And the professor was actually like an old engineer from IBM. And so I think we were doing like Visual Basic,
that stuff.
Little programs on, Visual Basic, like saving it on floppy disks and whatnot. And that's definitely when I kind of fell in love with like the problem solving aspect of software. And I kind of got hooked from there. Obviously no one was really talking about, going into computer science very much at the time, nor were they pushing, women into the field.
Yeah.
In fact, like, I kind of entered the field like right after the .com bust. So everyone kind of thought the internet was going away, and most people thought it was a bad idea for me to be getting a degree in computer science. So I entered the industry at just a very, very different time, when it was a very different industry. And, my colleagues and I in college were just like desperate to find a job. I mean, a lot of software engineers were still getting laid off when I was entering the industry. And so I was just lucky to get a full-time job at IBM, where I was interning my last 2 years of college. And so I felt lucky, but I went into it because I loved what I was doing, not necessarily because I thought it was like, it was a hot industry to go into, or I was going to make a lot of, money. In fact, most of my parents' friends thought I was making a horrible mistake and that I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills because I was going into software, actually, which is really hilarious to think back on. So
that's really, to to think that that was a thing to think about back then, and now it's like, the most profitable companies in the world are software companies.
I know, it shifted.
Also,
the whole world has shifted. Yeah.
Everybody's in the business of software in some sort of way or another anyways, so.
Yeah. No, I know.
I know we're going to talk about some stats throughout this interview, because both you and I think we love stats. Do you remember in college, or even in your programming class in high school, like, do you remember what was the split between like female, male, or in college? Like, do you remember more or less, like, were you the only girl in class?
So in high school, to be honest, I don't have any recollection of what was going on in terms of like how many boys or girls were in that class. I was like, there's so many times in my childhood, I look back and realize how like laser focused I was, that I was so oblivious to a lot of that. Wow. Up until it hit me in the face. In college, the reason I know more specifically in college, I was like the only woman in a lot of those classes, because I was actually called out at one point. There was a class that I was taking. I think it was like an algorithms class, and we were literally sitting in class about to take the final, and everybody had their books on their desks cramming for the final, and the teacher walked through the back of the room and he said, "Good morning, gentlemen and Candice." And I remember feeling like really blindsided, like, why did he just call me out? Am I in trouble? Did the test start? Am I not supposed to have my book on my desk? Like, I had no idea why the hell he called me out. And I sat there just very confused for about 10 minutes until I realized, wait, am I the only non-gentleman in the room? And like, I like looked around and tried to figure out why he called me out. And that's when I realized the day of the final that I was the only woman in class.
What? Really?
Yeah. So obviously that was happening to me in college, but I didn't really like pay attention to it until people started pointing it out. And I think about that story a lot, because I'm actually glad I wasn't paying attention to it, because it was a hard class and I was focused on what I was supposed to be focusing on. But then, you would run into certain things that kind of like woke you up to what was going on around you. So I definitely know that happened to me in college. Yeah.
What a blessing in disguise is like to not be aware in some ways, because if you focus too much on it, I know, like, I have in my experience at times focused too much on how different I am than my peers, and that has not served me well, right? And so
I know I totally get that, and I think about that a lot. It's confirmation bias, it's so impactful. If you focus on it too much, it doesn't actually help you, which is sometimes counterintuitive. There was a study that was recently done with boys and girls. They split them up into two different groups, and for the first group, they said, you're going to take a math test, and we're testing the impact of eating breakfast in the morning. The second group, they said, you're going to take a math test, and we're testing who is better at math, boys or girls. Girls did significantly worse in that second group, because they were told in the very beginning, this is to see how good you are at math compared to the boys. So that study just kind of knocks you in the face. Like, confirmation bias is a very, very strong internal motivator, and it affects your performance. And so it's like finding the balance of like being aware of it, but not getting so consumed by it that it actually impacts your performance. It's a very challenging thing. Yeah.
Wow. So many questions. So I want to put a pin on, you said until it hits you, like there was a moment until it hit you in the face. Was that the moment in college that happened, or were other moments in which you were like, oh, I'm the only girl again? And what did you do about it?
So that moment in college was probably the most defining, because I was old enough to actually start paying attention after that. Like, it was probably something I looked for when before I probably wasn't looking for. In hindsight, there was a handful of things that happened in that high school class that I really didn't like fully absorb until I was older. So I don't think that really like hit me. There were certainly certain companies where it was very stark. I actually started out my career in very diverse environments. And this actually makes sense when you look at historical data that shows how many women were actually graduating with computer science degrees. Yeah, like if a lot of people think that we were kind of coming out of this hole that women never really came out of. But when you look at how many women graduated with computer science degrees over the history of the United States, we actually peaked in 1984. There's 37% of women graduating with computer science degrees. Then over the next quarter century, it declined deeply. It bottomed out around 18% in '08. We've slightly increased from there, but that's actually very hopeful when I look at those statistics, because we actually achieved 37% at one point in time, and I think we can get back there, and I think we can surpass that. So I think that's hopeful for people to know that, like, we've done this before. We can get back there. It's not like we're coming out of a hole that we've never been out of before. But when you look at those statistics and then you think back to like the late 90s when I was actually going into computer science, I was surrounded by a lot of women, like in my teams. Like my first manager was this kick-ass woman at IBM. Like my first few companies were in very, very diverse environments. So again, like I didn't get hit in the face with it until like midway through my career, when I actually went into environments that were not diverse at all. And so I was blissfully ignorant for the first, few years of my career, because I was just, very lucky to walk into very diverse environments in the very beginning of my career.
I love the difference in experience, because, my experience has obviously been not that. And I had to find the statistics from you and from others that were like, oh, no, actually, there's a lot of women. It just happened in different period of times, and we don't see it as much in specific companies. There's actually a theory online that said that the reason why the drop happened is because at that time the computer science was actually, like in the 80s, it was actually more mathematics and algorithms, which was a different college department that women were actually more aligned with. And then at some point in the 80s or 90s, when it became cool to be a software engineer, because hardware apparently was all the rave before that. And at some point, software became the cool thing to do, and they moved software into the engineering departments, which were predominantly male, and women would not apply it as much to engineering departments. It didn't become an engineering degree until sometimes during that period. And then it became mostly a masculine degree.
Interesting. Yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible.
Yeah, and I found that like interesting. And so do you have another maybe scenario in which you were like, oh, there's a difference here between like how many female are in tech and males, and then how did you balance out? How did you like reconcile the fact that you did not have that experience, and how do you balance the fact of being aware, but not being like overly focused on it?
At the end of the day, you have to live with the work you've done and the reputation that you've built for yourself, and that work will speak for itself regardless of what happened around that. And then, and at the end of the day, that's what you're left standing with. And so I try to focus on that when you kind of get wrapped up in all the other stuff that happens at any job or at any company.
Yeah.
And just try to focus on like, how do you want to feel at the end of all of this? What do you want to be proud of? And then try to really hone in on that. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know why it came to me this way, but it's kind of like planning for the exit strategy. Even if you don't have an immediate exit kind of thing, you want to feel at the end, it may come to an end. It will come to an end at some point. How do you want to feel at that end? Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's really clever. Actually, I never thought about thinking about the end when I got into a role. So that's cool. Obviously you held a bunch of like super interesting roles. We talked a little bit about the stats that you have right now, actually, at your company. You have quite a bit of females on your team. Do you know about what % of your team is women?
Yeah, right now within the entire tech org, we're at like 32%. At a minimum, I'd like to get to parity, to 50-50, and go over that if we can. But yeah, we've probably doubled the amount of women in about a year and a half.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then Do you have any strategies that you may be thinking about or implementing that you find effective that you can obviously share, that will help achieve the goals that you're looking for?
Sure. Yeah, I actually helped co-author a white paper with Illinois Technology Association, Women Influence Chicago, on this topic, because I think this is something that a lot of tech startups are grappling with, especially when they don't have a huge recruiting team, or a lot of resources around them to help recruit people. I mean, I would say in the tech industry in general, especially in Chicago, it's a very competitive environment, and people have a lot of choices.
Yes.
So, I mean, well, first and foremost, like, anybody that thinks that they can just post a job description and pray that you'll get a bunch of diverse applicants is like dreaming. Like, that's not, it hasn't worked like that in like at least 15 years. And so, like, you need,
But I know it.
Yeah, it takes some work. You need to have really good recruiters that are passionate about building diverse teams. You need to have really good sourcers. It takes, you can certainly use referrals to a certain extent, but that's something you need to keep an eye on. Like, if you have a predominantly white cis male tech team and you're really relying heavily on referrals, you're probably going to get more white cis men. If you have a really diverse team, that works in your favor, right? So you have to just keep an eye on like how heavily you lean into referrals. Obviously, the organizations that you partner with and the areas where you look for candidates matter a lot. Also like internships and like relationships with universities and colleges. Like, you can make some pretty specific choices to make sure that you're bringing in diverse candidates and you're partnering with predominantly diverse schools, so that you're not always doing the thing that everybody's always done, or you're going after your alma mater, or you're going after a predominantly white school. And so I think a lot of those decisions can go a long way. Also, like, there's so much you can do with the interview process, obviously. I think people lose out on really valuable candidates because that process is broken. I mean, you don't really ever stop tweaking that process, I think. Mm-hmm. So making sure that people get the right education and training around how you should be running an interview loop, defining what you're looking for before you bring any candidates in, take as much subjectivity out of it as you can, make sure that you're judging all candidates on the exact same criteria and not changing the criteria depending on who you're talking to. Yeah. How do you record feedback? How are you debriefing about candidates? Like, all of that matters. And it takes a lot of work. It's definitely not something that takes like, oh, I rewrote my job description and I took out comments about, superstars. Therefore, like, I should get a lot of diverse candidates applying for my, it takes a lot more work than that. So, but it's definitely, it definitely works. Also, if you're actually capturing data on your interview process and the candidates, and you actually do some analysis on that data, it will hit you in the face where your problem areas are, and that will help you prioritize what you go after first. Nice. Yeah, oftentimes you can just apply the same sort of rigor that an engineer would, deploy to their job, or like an A/B test. Like, look at the data, try to collect as much data as you can, and that will kind of tell a story about where the problem areas are or what you could be going after.
Yeah, I love that. This is mostly entering the company. How about promotions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I could talk about that for like an hour. So something I always do anytime I walk into a company is I clearly define career ladders, job descriptions, and salary bands for all of the areas within that tech org. I do this for several reasons. First off, it's a good way to just re-level everybody to make sure that everybody is being paid fairly. Oftentimes you find pay discrepancies in a company, and it's usually never a malicious thing.
It's involuntary.
It's stuff happens. People move jobs, or like people aren't paying attention to salary bands or movements in the market. And it's very easy for those disconnects to happen. especially at early stage companies when you might not have like fully flushed out, HR teams to support you. A lot of managers kind of just got anointed one day into management and they've not really been taught a lot of this stuff. So it's really important to just have those blueprints out there. So people know how they can grow their career within your company, but you also have a process that's going to be fair and transparent, and people won't feel like there's favoritism at play. If there's a blueprint on how they grow their career and there's very clear guidelines on what you need to do to get to the next level. So I always make sure that is laid out because that helps a lot. But then also, like, I think every manager and leader within a tech org has a lot of power and control to promote people, not just promote people, but like advocate for certain people to take on certain projects. People that might not be at the top of your mind necessarily. Maybe it's somebody that's a little bit more introverted that you might not think of immediately, but is incredibly talented and needs an advocate, right? And so I think there's a lot of opportunities from that position to really like advocate for people and advocate for people's growth. And sometimes that's pushing people into outside of their comfort zone and giving them some pep talks on what they can do,
We all been there, right? We've always had that person who was like, okay, you're going to take this on, or I want you to take this on. And you were like, wait, what? And then, they're like, yes, you need to do this.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I think growth and opportunities within the company are incredibly important, and making sure that, women are getting those opportunities, even when they might not be like the first person that comes to mind, like making sure you're calling that out and asking those questions.
Here's a question for you that I get often from women. I think younger women in their profession, not necessarily of age. The question that I get is often like, how do you advocate for diversity for women without being political? I'll tell you my response. I want to hear. I'll tell you my response, and I'll give you that way a couple of minutes or a minute to think about what you would say. But the way I answer is like, how do you create change without being political? It's really hard. Like for me, it's like you cannot just shy away from being political. I think it's about making sure that we have a balance and making sure that we are we can afford equality across, right? Regardless of whether we're political or not. And I think there's some women, I feel like they're scared of being overly political at work because it makes them seem like they're being unfair. They advocate for a group that is already a minority, and they may feel like maybe they're in fear of losing their job or getting in trouble because of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've seen that quite a bit where like you see, women or people of color kind of put in a position to like advocate for these things. And then that can kind of get polarizing at the time, and I've certainly found myself in situations where I did not have a lot of support at the top for, to make the team and the company more diverse, right? I was definitely swimming upstream in a lot of places, and I definitely learned that I have also learned the hard way that there is different ways to approach the topic that might be not seen as much as politically charged. At the end of the day, it's something that we all believe is morally correct, but there's different ways to approach the topic. Like the first one I would start with is this, and there's been so many studies that point to this, so it's an easy place to start. Diverse teams just are more successful.
Perform better,
better.
Higher revenue and bottom line impact.
Revenue, top line, and bottom line improvement. No one's going to be against that, right? That is a common denominator that you can start at, that everyone will obviously sign up for. And so there's different ways to approach the topic depending on who you're talking to and what you're dealing with to get the same outcome, but kind of coming at it from a different direction. Because yeah, because that can be very, very effective. And especially if you're working on a customer facing product, you obviously want your product to be used by a wide variety of people, not just somebody that looks like you, and so you're naturally going to build a better product if the people, working with you, but working on the product and building the product have diverse perspectives. And I have so many amazing examples of that throughout my career, where I've seen just a missing perspective that just surprises everybody, like one of the recent. And so I think diverse teams just make better products, and those products will be used by a much broader population, which of course ends up translating to positive revenue for any company. And so nobody is going to argue with that if you approach the topic from that angle.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that. Speaking of diverse team and coming into COVID here, have you noticed any opportunities from a CTO perspective, which I definitely have as a manager? Instagram has the opportunity to actually hire, all over the world, but generally across the US. You being local to Chicago, have you seen any opportunities to diversify further your employees or your teams, based on the fact that perhaps you have the opportunity to hire remote teams, or do you have that opportunity at all?
Yeah, we've definitely started shifting our perspective of that when everybody went remote, for sure. There are certain aspects of our business that are very, very physical and local to Chicago, so I don't think we would ever open up all remote positions for every group in the org, but there's certainly areas where it does make sense, and we have started opening that up. The thing that's at the top of my mind after what happened with COVID, especially in Chicago, with what happened with Chicago public schools, I do worry about the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on women's advancement in their careers, and just how they've ended up with all of these childcare issues, more so than their partners. And I'm very, very much thinking a lot about that and worried about that. And I don't have a solution, but this pandemic has certainly showed a lot of cracks in our society. And it's very concerning that, some of those reports have been very scary. A lot of the gains that women have made, over the last several decades have kind of been reversed just in a year's time, which is a scary thing to see. So I think all companies need to just be very, very sensitive and aware of that, and figure out what we can all do to create supportive environments.
Okay.
Were
you in a situation where do you have children? Are you in a situation where you had to manage?
So I have two stepsons, but they are teenagers. Okay. And I was very, very thankful that they are old enough to take care of themselves.
Clothe themselves.
I joke with my team. I actually have got to spend a lot of time with some of my coworkers' babies, which I have really enjoyed. It makes any Zoom call so much better. I'm sure they don't feel as happy about the whole situation, and I'm sure I would feel differently if I had little ones running around me, because it's very, very hard to juggle both. Yeah. I personally enjoyed seeing their children more, but it's so yeah. I have had it very easy compared to others, because they're old enough to do e-learning on their own.
what a great opportunity though, to really connect in deeper ways with the people on your team, seeing their family, perhaps even on a daily basis, and really getting involved into a different aspect of their lives that perhaps sometimes is hidden because
yes. It's been amazing. Some of my coworkers with very small children, they went from, being in diapers to walking around in a year, right? They've all, kids grow so fast. And so it's been really fun to watch that growth with them. You definitely get a new aspect. It's much more intimate aspect of everybody's family life and seeing their kids grow. And it's been enjoyable in different ways. Yeah.
That's awesome. What are you thinking of a leader, as a leader? What are you thinking? Do you have any theories about what the future of work is going to look like given this transition that we had in the last year?
I think it's going to be a very long time before like we would go back to life as it was before COVID. Like I don't think we'll be going back 5 days a week like we did before. I think it will always be a little bit more hybrid now. I think work from home will always be a little like more ingrained in our day-to-day schedule than it was before. However, I do think everyone is definitely missing that human interaction. That is just not something that you get over, face-to-face, video calls. And people are definitely missing that interaction. And so I think people are craving some of that. Maybe not every day. We obviously have to figure out how to do it safely, but I do think we need to do that. We need to open up opportunities for people to interact and see each other.
Nice. Are you planning to do you have any plans to change, any specific plans to change your office layout, or what does an office where people go to ideate and create versus actually sit down on their computer and work, which now they can do at home, right? And maybe they can do it better at home if, school reopen and having downtime permitting, right? They can do that work better at home when it's a little bit quieter. What does an office that is engaging and creates relationship and culture and ideas look like in your mind?
I think you hit on a good point. I think some people will prefer, like when they need to sit down and do some deep work, I think a lot of people would prefer to do that type of work at home now and not necessarily be in a room with a lot of people and a lot of commotion. Because I think like that's why, you saw a lot of people with noise canceling headphones in the office, because sometimes you do need to zero in and do some work and like not be so distracted. And so I think people will probably try to gravitate towards doing that type of work at home. In-person work, I mean, there's definitely some, just some socializing that needs to happen. But I think in terms of like getting together and brainstorming or trying to like collaborate cross-functionally, I think those spaces need to be big enough to comfortably socially distance or have a conversation without getting crammed into a tiny little conference room. Like so many times offices are like you're crammed into a tiny little room. I think like this is actually easier for Farmer's Fridge because we're in a very large space in Westtown that has very, very tall ceilings and like really big spaces that I think we'll be able to like set that up a little bit easier than some office buildings in Chicago probably would. But I think the in-person stuff needs to be big enough to spread out, but also be together and facilitate some, brainstorming or, innovative conversations, and not necessarily like being in the office when you need to zone in and like get something done.
Totally. Oh my God, I agree. We're coming to the end here. It's been great, and times goes by so fast every time I have you on. It's just great. I think I have a couple of things that I want to ask you about. One of them is, what is Farmer's Fridge up to? I know you've mentioned in the past that you guys have innovated through this COVID. I'm super excited actually for Farmer's Fridge to be doing the work that they're doing. As a local Chicago company, we don't have enough of really good, successful companies. So I'm super excited that they've survived and actually look like they're thriving now. You talked about touchless deliveries.
Oh yeah, touchless pickup for
touchless
fridges.
What else? Tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing and maybe some of the things coming up if you can, like some.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so right when the shelter in place orders happened, when the pandemic hit, we launched delivery, which we had never done before as a company. For those people that don't know Farmer's Fridge, we're a healthy food company, and our original business model were these smart vending machines in places where normally fresh, healthy, affordable food was very hard to find. Think airports, hospitals, universities, schools, and whatnot, and businesses like office buildings as well. And so when the pandemic hit, about 85% of our revenue was gone within a week. And so we launched delivery so that we could actually, utilize our supply chain and our distribution team to deliver to customers directly instead of those smart fridges. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say you've helped a lot of first responders too, I believe.
Yeah, we did. We had the opportunity to serve the New York Presbyterian Hospital network right as COVID was hitting the Northeast really hard, and so we were able to serve food to the doctors and the nurses on the front lines, which was awesome. Actually, the fridges that remained open during the pandemic were predominantly in hospitals, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so for those fridges, we wanted to give a way where people could like vend that food without touching the touch screen, because initially when the pandemic happened, we weren't really sure how it was getting transmitted. And so the tech team worked very, very quickly, and we basically launched touchless pickup. So you can reserve a salad or a bowl at a fridge, and then you can literally vend it from the app on your phone, and you don't have to actually touch the fridge.
Wow.
So we launched that in the summer of last year.
Amazing.
And then we recently launched delivery in the app as well. So now from the mobile app, you could order something at a fridge, or you can order delivery to have it dropped off right at your house.
Wow, that's awesome. Anything coming up for 2021 that you can share without disclosing, things that you cannot share?
I know. I wish I could share more at this moment. The one thing I can speak to is we have started doing a partnership with Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
And so yeah, it's fun because you can go to unlikely places and get fresh, healthy food or lunch with your coffee and your donut in the morning, which is interesting. And so yeah, I think when you look at the how the world has changed, like when you walk into a grocery store, there used to be a salad bar. Like those salad bars are gone, and so I think certain retailers have like a new need that they're looking to fill. That I think brings some interesting opportunity, to Farmer's Fridge.
I love the partnership with unlikely partners like Dunkin'
Yes.
Donuts, because I feel like it may bring health options for people that usually don't have access to that options. And I mean, honestly, just having the option of buying something else is amazing.
Yes, exactly. And like the mission of the company is to make healthy food more accessible and more affordable to people in areas that might be living in like food deserts. And so if you can partner with a Dunkin' Donuts, there's many of those in those neighborhoods. And so I think it gives people a really healthy, great option to eat better and feed their families. So yeah, it's exciting.
So good. That's so good. I'm excited for what y'all are doing. All right, here's the last few questions. What is a book that you have gifted the most? Or what is a book that you have either gifted the most to your team, or something that you have read recently and you really liked it?
So my go-to for any manager is Quiet by Susan Cain. It's about how to manage introverts and how the value that introverts bring. I think our society has a tendency to prefer extroverts, and so and you'd miss out on a lot of like really amazing talent if you were ignoring people with those traits. And so I heard her speak at actually one of the past Grace Hopper conferences, and it kind of like blew my mind. And it was very helpful, I think, for me as a manager to think through how you can foster growth in unlikely places, with people that might not necessarily come to the top of everyone's mind, but are incredibly huge assets to the company. So yeah.
If there's one thing that you would want, I know and I think you've just said it, and I would love for you to repeat it if that's it. But if there's one thing that you would want our audience to remember, and let's target specifically like women that are either thinking about going into tech or in tech right now, what is that one thing?
You can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's hard to see that sometimes, but your presence in the industry is making a huge difference. Yeah, we need more of us at the table.
Absolutely.
So don't give up too soon because of one specific boss or one specific relationship. Like, it's broader than that. Like, if you truly love what you're doing and you love the craft of what you're doing, you can make a lot of different choices to find the right environment to do your work. But don't run away from a specific person and then accidentally leave your leave the
Passion.
opportunities behind and the passion
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Totally. I agree with that one. Nice. And then last question. What does it mean to be unbossed, in your opinion?
I don't know, what's the definition of unbossed?
Unbossed. Unbossed, actually, it's a funny story. I'll tell you. Basically, when I started working for Jellyvision, and I just had Amanda on actually on the podcast, and so I told her this story.
Yeah.
She was laughing. When I started working for Jellyvision, I discovered that my team accidentally discovered, because they were sharing their screen in a moment in which they shouldn't have shared, that there was a Slack channel called Unbossed, whatever, data team Unbossed. And basically it was a Slack channel for everybody except the boss, which was me. It was my whole team except for me, right? And I was like, damn, like that's not I don't want to be like that type of manager that my team cannot trust me to be in a channel. Right. We have to talk about things. And that was created before I started, to be completely honest. But I want to be the manager that is with the conversation, regardless of how hard, difficult, challenging, embarrassing that conversation is. So for my lasting career at Jellyvision, I worked really, 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 really hard to have the hard conversations with my team and to gain trust, create a relationship, and all of the good stuff, so that there was no so much chatter in the Embossed channel, and there was way more chatter in an honest and transparent channel in the main channel that I was in, right? And so that's kind of like, I decided to give my podcast this title because, I don't know, that stuck with me so hard and was such a defining moment for me as a manager. And that kind of like is something that I always want to remember. But it also speaks to the fact of, I think, of like being transparent and doing your own thing and earning, like earning yourself honestly, whether it's at work or in your personal life.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to the how you carry yourself, your integrity, whether you're the boss or you're not the boss, and being someone, being approachable, someone that you feel like you can have hard conversations with, but somebody that's going to tell it to you straight, and not necessarily play games, and that kind of goes without fear. Yeah, I think it's important. It's a good thing to think about on both sides, really, whether you're, not in a management role or you are in a management role.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. Candice, it's been amazing having you on. I want to thank you so much. I follow you since I started working in Chicago, and I'll continue following your career.
Oh, thank you.
I'm excited to work for you one day, or work with you one day.
I'd be honored.
So have a great rest of the week. And then I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.